to another one of our videos, and this one today is looking at the kyphosis posture, and in particular the Dowager's hump, which is as seen in this picture here. So there's a good little quote you can keep in the back of your mind. I'll read it out for you. Prolonged muscle tightness leads to fatigue, which ultimately decreases the force available to meet postural and movement demands, and that's from Dr. Vladimir Yanda. So let's get into the video, and we'll discuss. We're really going to be discussing the causes, not so much the exercise solutions, which I'll do in a separate video, just because there's just so many causes and solutions to this, as you'll soon see. And I didn't even realize just how many there was that myself until I actually write them down, and I had to sort of break things up into two. So anyway, so a lot of people are very familiar with this type of posture, in particular with older people, but to be honest, I'm starting to see this in younger people, even teenagers. I'm starting to see early signs of this, which is astounding, and we'll discuss the reasons why, because there's a lot of them. But this type of posture leads to all types of problems, from breathing problems to obviously musculoskeletal problems, especially in the neck and the shoulder and even the lower back. And once it's there, it's very difficult to reverse it. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but for an older person like this, there's a lot of structural things that just will all be pretty much impossible to reverse now. So the earlier you can recognize the onset of it, the better it is, so you can prevent it from becoming a bigger problem later on. So exactly what is it? Well, it's a forward bending of the spine, and the outward curvature on the upper back, just at the base of the neck, places compression on the vertebrae, so on the bones. So you can see here this girl here who's sort of looking at her laptop because it's too low. If she had it based up, she wouldn't be sitting like that. But it's the repetitiveness of it that is putting this person in the forward slouching position. So understand, it's not a thing created from a one-off event. It's created from a stack of events, and this is the classic one, and this is the one where I'm seeing problems in teenagers and younger people, where I never used to see this before. But so as I was saying, it's not from an overnight thing or a one-off thing. It's many repetitive movements, anything that's forward leaning, and what happens is there's like fatty deposits that are seen at the base. The fatty deposits are like basically multiple micro compression fractures in the vertebrae. So it's like the bone being repeatedly broken and it calcifying on top of itself, and almost like a sand dune, just sort of to try and strengthen and stiffen it from being fractured so often. It just creates more and more and more and more calcium to strengthen it. So it obviously stops the bone from being damaged, but it ends up fusing yourself into this position, which is where you see in that earlier picture. So it looks like it's a fatty or muscle thing, but it's actually multiple fractures of the bone leading to calcium deposits, and then the fatty deposits build upon on top of it. And it all starts from a young person doing this or this. And as you'll see, there's a lot of reasons other than just phones and computers. There's many other things to consider, but obviously they're two of the big things that are the problem. So what's also things that we can't ignore is, like, the obvious thing is, like in this picture, to see the Dowager's hump is the obvious thing we see, but we can't ignore the problems that are going on below as well. So even around the hips, and you can sort of see this guy's sort of sucking his ass under. Even his knees are more bent, and see this loss of height. So basically, the entire spinal column here is being squashed. So everything's being compressed by gravity. And there's certain muscles that are going to, so this abdominal area is going to be really active because it's actually stuck in contraction, and vice versa. This thoracic part is being overstretched, so it's actually being weakened. So one area is being strengthened, one area is being weakened, and if we kept going down the chain, we'd find more and more. So, but the thing to understand is there's lots of changes than just the one that you see, and there's lots of damage being done to other joints than just the head and the neck. All right, so So one of the big problems that I start to see very early on, and this is before the Dowager Hump, so in this posture, before the fatty deposits we start to see, we in the early stages we start to see huge problems with hip mechanics and especially scapular stability. The scapula starts to become completely dysfunctional, losing its mobility and its stability. It's sort of a very unique joint that it needs both things at the same time. So here's a good quote from the physiotherapist who does a lot of books and stuff you can read. But I found this was an interesting one where he sort of said, almost all neck pain and headaches I treat are primarily due to poor shoulder blade or scapular function, regardless of the structural diagnosis involved. All right, so he's basically saying almost every single case he sees with neck problems and headaches, there's a underlying scapular problem behind it, and the postural things lead to all of those things being created. Another good quote for you. I love using these quotes because these are like pioneers in postural correction. And obviously people who know way more than me, and the reason they quoted this is because they see it so often. And I myself have been doing this 16 years and I see the same things. So this quote here, muscle imbalance in today's society compounded by stress, fatigue and insufficient movement, as well as a lack of variety of movement. So I see this all the time where I give people exercises and corrective strategies, but the thing that's created their problem in the first place they're still doing. And sometimes it's the inactivity, it's the things they're not doing that are the problem. So so you have to sort of bear this in mind in terms of an exercise strategy to correct it. It's actually maybe not even a gym exercise that's really the solution. It's identifying that lifestyle habit that's behind it all in the first place. So all right, so if we're looking at potential causes, so there's a number of reasons. Now for the older person, the big problem is osteoporosis. So that's a disease that causes thinning of the bones. So if they don't have enough activity, especially resistance training, they are going to evolve into this type of posture, to see men where the bones become so soft that gravity is able to bend them. And what I start to see is a lot older people are starting to become a bit more aware, but I would say there's an overwhelming majority that just ignore the benefits of exercise, and in particular strength training. They just do not see it as a need, and the media and everything just believe you can resolve everything with surgery or a tablet. Unfortunately, you can't, and giving calcium and stuff like that, you can eat as many calcium tablets as you want. If you don't apply resistance to the bones, that nothing will change. All right, for them to have structural change, they must have resistance placed upon them. There's just no other way to do it. So decreased bone density occurs when the bones lose their minerals faster than their body can replace them. So lose minerals like calcium. So the density, the decrease in bone mineral density and changes in the bone quality make them more fragile. As a result, they can be more easily bent, as we've just discussed, and there's some pictures there that you can see and some good stats. All right. Obviously, women are much more susceptible to osteoporosis, mainly due to their lack of muscle mass to begin with, and also a much more complex hormonal system. So especially after they go through menopause, they're at the highest risk because their body no longer absorbs the calcium as it did when they were younger. And you can sort of see this little chart here gives you a good example of the difference between females and males. Now, you must understand that males are not invulnerable to it, and you can still see here there's still a big proportion of males and that's where a lot of people think it's only a female problem, and it's not. So and like I said, I start to see all this sort of stuff like here in these age groups early on. I reckon this area here is going to be, even probably earlier, we'll start to see this in years to come with the smartphone addiction and with the current lockdowns of people stuck inside looking at Netflix all day, and lack of strength training, poor diets, all those sort of things. So strength training is crucial. Like I said, you can be eating calcium and doing all the different things, but if you're not applying any strength training, you're going to evolve into that. These bones need to have the resistance, and researchers found that the multi-directional exercises with load, so like your lunges, your step-ups, so all multi-joint things. So the lady up the top here, she's one of our clients. She's 83, I think, this year, and there's her doing a deadlift. She only learnt how to do deadlifts when she was at 80. All right, so and this lady here, she's in her late 70s. So this is an example of a multi-joint where there's a load being placed through the right leg and through the left arm. All right, so these sort of movements are the ones that create the biggest effect on the bone density. All right, so if you sit on machines or you use rubber bands, or you just do yoga and Pilates, you're going to get some benefit, but it's not going to be enough. All right. As we said before, it's not just the old people. Young people think this is not relevant to them and they're immune to it. But if you're someone who's overweight, if you're someone who doesn't do any strength training, you have a sedentary job, maybe your life you're rated as very stressful, then there's a very good chance you're going to be developing early onset of bone density problems, because all of these factors are going to start to pound upon you. And this position here, lying, you sort of see this guy's stuck in this forward head posture. He's obviously he's overweight. He's a series of problems. This lady's got a lot of stress on her mind. So in both cases they're leading towards very bad health, very poor health. So quickly touching on poor diet. So calcium and also vitamin D, which is partly in food but mainly from the sun. But you could be doing a strength training program but eating junk food. All right. So if we're sort of flipping it around now, if you must be eating the right type of nutrition to reap the benefits from your program. So and this again it's more important as you become older, because older people do not absorb the vitamins as easily as they did when they were younger. Calcium is very important because it helps to regulate heart rate, obviously maintains bone mass, but unlike kids, the older people don't soak it up and their absorption declines so much more difficult. So they need a greater variety of it, as with vitamin D. So the diet becomes more important as you get older. So really, once you probably get above 40, you really can't sort of get away with the things you could do when you're in your 20s. Vitamin D, and I've done videos and lots of talking about this a lot lately due to lockdowns and the ignorance of the governments to the benefits of this. It's never actually been spoken about, but vitamin D is very, very important, and again, it's very important to the bone health. That was originally what they thought it was about, but now they realise that it actually influences the immune system just as much as it does with the bones. So anyway, as we age, our ability to make it is reduced by about 75%, and research has found that the vitamin D can get trapped in body fat. So if you're overweight, you have they've found about a 55% reduction in being able to produce it, convert it. All right, and these vitamin D deficiency is very, very common, and these are examples of just how countries around the world of just how prominent it is. All right, especially in colder climates where I am, and in Melbourne at the moment, it's winter and it's raining all the time. It's cold, and the government's telling us to stay inside. Nearly everyone would be vitamin D deficient right now. All right, can you sort of see how these sort of problems lead to bigger problems? I think next year you're going to see a huge rise in all these sort of postural and other things not related to COVID. So moving on before we run out of time, another cause that could be behind the kyphosis and the Dowager's hump could be like psychological problems, mental health problems. So this is something that's often missed when we're treating musculoskeletal things and we're looking for like exercise corrections, but maybe the underlying problem is the things going in that person's mind, that poor self-esteem and confidence, and we've all been in that situation before where you're just not, where you feel ashamed or you're embarrassed or something. You don't look at people in the eye, you look at the ground. And if you imagine if you're like that all the time, that person who's like that all the time is in a hunched position because they don't feel good about themselves. And this is a good example of this picture. You can sort of see that's identical to the old guy that we saw at the start. Obviously it's a young person, but if this person's psychological problems are not not addressed, then obviously it's going to lead to physical problems. All right, so I won't be able to go into all of the solutions to that. You can imagine that's a big topic on its own, but just understand it. It's a factor to consider. Obviously, sitting posture, workstation setup is everything. Probably the biggest mistake I see in this is actually around at the pelvis, where people suck their butt under and their butt rolls underneath, and it ends up rounding out their spine. This leads to butt gripping in their hips, but obviously the forward head posture becomes a problem. Laptops are some of the worst things, along with smartphones. And this, look, you don't need me to tell you that this is a horrible position to be sitting in for a long period. Both of these, if you do this for several hours, day after day, week after week, year after year, you are going. This is a fast track to all sorts of problems, and no exercise program is going to be able to counter that. You have to change these horrible positions. On our website, there's a description under the video here with article links to. This is just one of the slides that I had in one of our articles, where we give you some workstation setups. But you can sort of see here, setting up your things to force you to sit in the right position is obviously a great start. We're all aware of this, but it's amazing just how many people fall into the trap of doing that without realising. All right, so this could be the best exercise you've ever given. All right, no gym sort of special movement that I show you. It's just like setting up your working area correctly. Walking posture, this is another thing that we probably tend to ignore or neglect. A lot of people lead with their head, placing them like in a falling forward position. And this is a good example, this picture here. You can sort of see this middle one. Very rarely do you see that. That's sort of strange, but obviously you've just got to stand tall or look straight ahead. Don't look at the ground when you walk. It's amazing how many people look at the ground when they walk. Try and stand tall, stacked, the so-called spinal stacking. So if you stand tall when you walk, just think how often we walk. You mean, like it's a simple thing, but it can lead to, it's a good postural correction in its own right. Sleeping posture. The very first thing I have to address here is don't sleep on your stomach. There's just nothing good about sleeping on your stomach at all. All right. When you sleep on your stomach, or when you sleep in general, the muscles and the ligaments in your body are basically relaxed, completely relaxed. So they're not actually able to hold and protect the spine as they are when you're awake. So when the joints are put in horrible positions with no stability present, they're very vulnerable to excessive strain. And you do this will lead to all sorts of trouble. You must address this if that type of sleeper. Even sleeping on your back can pose a problem if you have a pillow that's too big, as we saw before with that guy on the couch. If I just go back to this position here, so that's sleeping on your back. That's just as bad as that stomach lying thing. That's creating huge trouble. That's a horrible position for your neck. All right, so best place is obviously sleep on your side. And you can see here, the pillow's too big. Look at the problem it does to the spine here. So you just got to have a good sleeping position with a pillow between your knees so you don't overstretch the hips. Pretty simple, but you think, how many hours a day do we sleep for? You mean, like, it adds up really fast to all these spinal problems. And again, it could be the best exercise you've ever given, just addressing your sleeping position. Occupations, sports and hobbies. So some sports are really good for fitness but horrible for the spine. So example is cycling. And I do a lot of cycling myself, and I know what it does to my neck, so I have to be very aware of that. And you can sort of see here, for me to look forward, because if he has his head neutral, he's going to be looking dead at the ground, and then he's going to smash his bike. He has to tilt his head into extension to look where it is. And you can sort of see this curvature of the spine. They're good to do as long as you can sort of have things that counter it. Musical instruments, some of them can create problems. Surgeons, look at they're sort of stuck in this position of that kyphosis, because they have this staring down for hours and hours. Photographers, I've had photographers come to see me specifically for postural problems. I've had geologists come to see me specifically for problems, because they're staring at rocks all day and looking through microscopes. So basically anything that's an repetitive action that requires long periods of looking down can be a cause of kyphosis and a Dowager's Hump. Now, this doesn't mean you have to get rid of your change jobs or stop cycling. It just means that your exercise becomes even more paramount to you, and you must have things that counter it. And you must be more aware of these little things, like how you walk, how you sleep, because they all can counter the things that you want to do in your life. And you can end up doing these things and not have these postural problems because you've got enough to combat it. But if you don't do any strength training or you don't do the right things, you're going to pay a price. It's just a matter of time. Now, last thing is obviously exercise selection, and I couldn't conclude. I put an article here, but if this is a video, but I couldn't leave this out because one of the worst things, the most abused exercise in a gym is the sit-up or the crunch, where people are trying to tighten their abs up. I don't understand why you'd want to try and do that if you're already in a position like that most of the day anyway. These exercises are by far the fastest way to give someone a bulging disc. There really is just not much to be gained from training the abdominals like this at all. There's so many better ways to do that. You're just creating an endless array of problems. So so repeatedly bending your spine, what it does, it leads to overstretching and weakness of the posterior fibrocartilage of the disc. So over time, this leads to the disc's integrity being placed upon them, being sort of squished out the back, as you can see in the picture down here. So they get squished out the back, and then that's where the sciatic nerves are, and then you're in all sorts of trouble. And then to get back out of that, it takes a lot of work. So these sort of things, that's really all they are going to achieve. They're really going to do nothing for you. There's so much better ways. Like I said, I won't go through into detail in this video for that because it would need another 15 minutes or so, but there's heaps of videos on our channel that you can look up for that. But just think of the positions that you're in all the time. You want to be the opposite, which would be like in extension. And if you're doing push-ups, an example, use like sticks on your back to address your posture so you don't have this forward head thing coming. This is a classic one we see with a push-up. So using exercises that enhance the timing and efficiency of movement. This one's an excellent exercise for the external obliques. You know what I mean? But most people just look at it as an arm exercise, but it's so much more than that. When you understand that, then you realise that you never needed these rubbish exercises to begin with. It's just bodybuilding corrupting your mind. Alright, so if you want more ideas, check out this heaps of free reports. Again, look at this in the description under the video here, because I've left a heaps of information for you to go and get your copies of these, and endless ideas on other videos of how to do things. And we'll follow this up with another video shortly that'll have some of the exercise corrections for kyphosis and Dowager's Hump. So I hope you enjoy that video, and we'll see you on our next one.